האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov, good evening. Dobra v'yecher. We are in the Zera Shimshon on Parshas Eikev. We're going to do Os Dalid, section number 4. Before we begin, let's take a look at two psukim from our Parsha. This is Devarim Perek Tes, psukim Zayin and Ches. Zechor al tishkach. Moshe says to the Jewish people, remember and do not forget. Eis asher hiktzafta es Hashem Elokecha bamidbar, how you provoked Hashem in the wilderness. Lemin hayom asher yotzasa me'eretz Mitzrayim, from the day that you went out of the land of Egypt, ad boachem ad hamakom hazeh, until you have come to this place. Mamrim hayisem im Hashem, you have been rebels with Hashem. Next pasuk, uvechorev hiktzavtem es Hashem, and at Chorev, which is a name of Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, and at Mount Sinai you provoked Hashem. You provoked Hashem. Vayins anaf Hashem bachem, and Hashem became angry with you. Lehashmid eschem, to destroy you. So these are two very strong psukim in which Moshe is clearly rebuking Bnei Yisrael. He's rebuking the Jewish people and saying that you have constantly angered Hashem and provoked Hashem. Zera Shimshon, Os Dalid, section 4. Zechor al tishkach eis asher hiktzafta v'chulei. He quotes our pasuk. Remember and do not forget how you have provoked, etc. Limin hayom asher yotzasa v'chulei, from the day that you went out, etc. Mamrim hayistimim Hashem, you have been rebels with Hashem. Uvechorev hiktzavtem, and at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai, you provoked Hashem, v'chulei, etc. Makshim, the commentators ask a question. De'achar she'omar shehoyu mamrimim Hashem, after Moshe said that the Jews had rebelled against Hashem mishayotzu mitzrayim, from the time they left Mitzrayim, ad boam ad hamakom hazeh, until they came to this place, meaning the place they were standing at the time that Moshe was speaking to them, shehu arvos Moab, which are the plains of Moab. That's where they were at this time. Shebo'u l'sham b'shnas ha'arboyim, and the Jewish people reached there in the 40th year after leaving Mitzrayim. So if Moshe already said to them, you have been provoking Hashem and angering him from the day you left Egypt for all 40 years until now, 40 years later, Loma chozar ufeiret, why did Moshe go back and specify uvechorev hiktzavta? And at Har Sinai you provoked Hashem, shehu maseh ha'egel, which is a reference to the sin, the grievous sin of the golden calf. V'halo bichlal mosayim mona. Is it not true that what the Gemara states, as you can see in Maseches Baba Kama, the Talmud states, it's a famous principle, included in the number 200 is the number 100, meaning that if we're ever in a situation when we know a higher number to be true, then certainly lower numbers would also be true. So if we have, let's say, testimony that a man owes another person $200, the person who is owed the money to doesn't have to walk around saying, oh boy, I'm so excited, I'm going to get $50, or I'm going to get $100, or I'm going to get $150. He's going to get $200 because that's what they testified to. So once we know that a higher number is true, we know that all of the lower numbers are included in that higher number, just like the number 100 is included in 200. And over here, once Moshe said to Bnei Yisrael, you have been provoking Hashem for all 40 years since we left Mitzrayim until today, when we're standing on the border of the land of Israel. Once Moshe said that, why did he have to specify, and you provoked Hashem at Har Sinai? He just said they're provoking him for 40 years. That included all the different provocations and all the different events in which Bnei Yisrael angered Hashem. So why did Moshe specify and single out Har Sinai and the Egel HaZahav? Next paragraph. V'yesh lomar, and we can say, Shekavonas Moshe hoyusolomar. Moshe's intention was to say, Shelegabe HaKodesh Baruch Hu, in reference to Hashem, Sheyodea kol machashavos, who knows all of human beings, all of people's thoughts. Hayumamrim and Hayom, you were rebels from the day Sheyotzu miMitzrayim, that you left Mitzrayim. In terms of Hashem, vis-a-vis Hashem, the Jewish people were rebels from the day they left Mitzrayim because Hashem knows all of their most secret, innermost thoughts, and he knows that they had rebellious thoughts from the very beginning. But regarding the rest of the world, human beings, lo nisvada davar zeh, this thing did not become known, meaning the rebelliousness of Bnei Yisrael did not become publicly known to the Jewish people and to the world at large, ad maseh ha'egel, until they built the golden calf, until the sin of the golden calf. V'hainu, and this is reflected. This idea is reflected because if we look back and we in the Torah, when it talks about the Jewish people leaving Egypt all the way back in the beginning of Shmos Ksiv, it's written Vayehi b'shalach v'chule, and it was when Paro sent out the people, v'lo nocham, he did not lead them, v'chule, etc. He did not lead them the shortest way to Eretz Canaan, which would have been to go through the land of the Plishtim, of the Philistines. Ki Amar, because he said, v'chule, pen yinochem ha'am, perhaps the people will see a war and regret that they left Egypt. V'shovu Mitzrayim, and they'll return to Mitzrayim. So the Zera Shimshon directs our attention to the fact that going all the way back to when Bnei Yisrael left Mitzrayim, this pasuk is taken from the beginning of Parshas V'Shalach. If you go all the way back to then, to the actual Exodus and going out of Mitzrayim, Hashem said, wait a minute, a word of caution, don't Moshe, don't take them the shortest way possible because they might bump into some kind of fighting and want to immediately return to Mitzrayim. Shenira mizeh, it is apparent from this, shelibam lo hayusholem ima kodesh baruch hu. Their hearts were not fully committed to Hashem. V'lo hayu muchanim lishmoa b'kolo, and they were not prepared to totally listen to his voice. Ela adarabah, but just the opposite, lachzor leMitzrayim. They would have returned to Mitzrayim. So this is a very powerful point. Let's pause for a moment to understand this point and how it illustrates the main point that the Zera Shimshon is making in this paragraph. So first of all, Zera Shimshon says that all the way back when Bnei Yisrael left Mitzrayim, Hashem was already concerned that if they saw fighting, if they encountered an enemy in a battle, they would say, let's return to Mitzrayim. So the Zera Shimshon says, think about the ramifications of that. Think of what that means. That must mean that all the way from the beginning when they left Mitzrayim, even before they started traveling through the Midbar and had anything, they had nothing to complain about at this point. There was nothing to be worried about or complain about now. It's the beginning of the journey. And still, Hashem said, I know their hearts. And I know what's in their minds and their hearts and their secrets. And if they come up against fighting, then they will return to Mitzrayim. So clearly, the level of emunah, the level of trust in Hashem, emunah and bitachon in Hashem, was not strong enough, wasn't sufficiently strong to prevent Hashem from thinking that they would want to return to Mitzrayim. So that's what we see from that pasuk, and that's what the Zera Shimshon says is meant by the idea that when Moshe said, "You have been rebels from the very beginning of the time you left Egypt," that means in terms of Hashem's understanding of the people. However, that was not known to everyone, their lack of true emunah and bitachon in Hashem. Next paragraph. When the nation came to Har Sinai, hikdimu naaseh lenishma. They put the word naaseh, we will do, before the word nishma, we will listen. Now, just to digress for a moment, we use that fact of Bnei Yisrael, of the Jewish people, saying naaseh v'nishma, we will do and we will listen, as one of the great testaments, a legendary fact of their incredible trust in Hashem. They said, we're ready to do the whole Torah and only afterwards listen and hear what the laws of the Torah are. So we use that based on a teaching from Chazal, which we'll see shortly, as a great proof of the Jewish people's faith. But what we're going to see here is that that's not the only way to look at it. The Isa b'Medrash, it states in the Medrash, this is from Shmos Rabbah, al pasuk vayitein el Moshe kechaloso. The Medrash is commenting on the pasuk of Hashem giving Moshe the luchos, the tablets. So the Medrash makes a unusual statement. L'cha Hashem hatzdaka. The Medrash Rabbah brings in a pasuk from Sefer Daniel. To you, Hashem is the charity or is righteousness, v'chule, etc. And the etc. are the words v'lonu boshes hapanim. And we have the busha, we have the humiliation. So the pasuk says, you, Hashem, have righteousness, and we have humiliation. Medrash continues, Noel Yisrael lomar naaseh v'nishma. It was appropriate, it was a good thing when the people said, we will do and we will listen, naaseh v'nishma. Shema Noel lohem lomar, was it also proper for them to say, Eile Elohecha Yisrael, this is your God, O Jewish people, when referring to the Egel HaZahav, to the golden calf? Ad kan Lishono, until here's a quote from the Medrash. So the Medrash says that it was proper and appropriate and wonderful for the Jews to say Naaseh v'nishma, we will do and we will listen, but it certainly was very inappropriate. It can't be argued that it was proper for them to say, to point to the golden calf and say, this is your God, O Jews, O Jewish people, this is your God, this golden calf, this idol is your God. So that's what it states. V'hakusha mivoeres. And the question on this little excerpt from the Medrash is very clear. Demiba'ar lo yeda bozeh. Because who could possibly be foolish or ignorant enough not to know this? How could anyone not know that when the Jews said Naaseh v'nishma, that was proper, appropriate, and laudatory, but when they looked to the golden calf as a type of God or leader, that was a terrible busha, a terrible humiliation, and a very improper, inappropriate thing to do. Why do we need the Medrash to come and tell us that? Top of the next column. Umilvad ma shekasavnu bozeh b'parshas kisisa. Zera Shimshon says, besides for what we wrote about this, how we explained it back in Parshas Kisisa, Od yesh lomar b'derech acher. There is another thing we can say in order to understand this medrash. Shelich ora ein kol kach shevach liyisrael b'naaseh v'nishma. Because when we look at the words naaseh v'nishma, it's possible to understand them in a way that is not so praiseworthy, that's not so good. Shehoil shekavonosam hoyisa, since it's possible that their intent, the intent of the Jewish people, in other words, was when they said naaseh v'nishma, lim'os b'torah shebal peh, to reject the oral Torah, the oral law, the Torah shebal peh, which today we refer to as the Talmud. That could have been their intention. Kimosha Kosev, Hazera Berach Parshas Yisro, as is written in the commentary, the 17th century commentary on Parshas Yisro, B'Shem HaMedrash, in the name of the Medrash. Shekifias ha'har kegigis, when the Medrash says that Hashem held Mount Sinai over the heads of the people like a barrel, and he said, unless you do the right thing now, I'm going to drop this on you. That was because of the Torah Shebal Peh, of the Jewish people's lack of willingness to fully accept the Torah Shebal Peh. Lachein Amru, therefore, they said, Na'aseh, we will do. What did they mean we will do according to this perspective, this negative interpretation? We will do kol ma sheyeh b'chsav. We will do everything that's written in the Torah. V'achar kach nishma, and afterwards we will listen Torah Shebal Peh, to the oral explanation of the written words of the Torah. L'kaima kefi ritzonenu, will listen and fulfill according to our will, what we choose to fulfill, v'lo v'toras chiyuv, and not according to the Torah of obligation. So the Zera Shimshon says it's important to understand that there are sources. This is from a medrash and a commentary, an earlier commentary, that says Nasa v'nishma can be understood in a very negative way. Specifically, that the Jewish people said, we're ready to accept the Torah Shebichsav and do it. Naaseh, we will do the Torah Shebichsav. But when it comes to the Torah Shebal Peh, the oral law, Nishma, we want to hear it and decide for ourselves which parts of it we accept and which parts we will fulfill. And that's why Hashem had to hold Har Sinai over their heads, so to speak, in the language of another medrash, in order to say to them, you need to accept the Torah Shebichsav and the Torah Shebal Peh fully and completely, comprehensively, or this could be a place where you are buried under this mountain. They understood clearly from Hashem that they needed to accept both the Torah Shebichsav and the Torah Shebal Peh. Ella, next paragraph, Ella she'anu dorshim adarabba. But we use a more commonly, we interpret the words Nasev v'nishma in a positive way, adarabba, just the opposite from this negative way. L'shevach Yisrael, as a way of praising the Jewish people. Kidei amrinan b'Shabbos, as we say in a Gemara in Masechta Shabbos. The Gemara over there brings down a discussion between a certain heretic and the great Talmudic sage Rava. And the heretic says, Amo Peziza. The Jews at the time of Har Sinai were a very impulsive people. Dekadmisu pumaichu leudnaichu. They put their mouth first before their ears. In other words, the heretic said to Rava, if you just look in the Torah itself, you'll see that the Jews were impulsive, irrational people, and they jumped up and said, Naseh, they called out, we're going to do the Torah, but they did that before they even heard the laws of the Torah. They said, we're going to do the laws v'nishma, and then we'll hear the laws afterwards. So this heretic was criticizing them and saying that was a very foolish thing to say, a very impulsive thing to say. Rava the sage answered the heretic, Anon disaginon bishleimuso, we who go in the paths of complete trust in Hashem, ksiv bon, it's written about us, and this is a pasuk from Sefer Mishlei, tumas yisharim tanchem, the sincerity of the upright will lead them, meaning that it is precisely the Jewish people's trust and faith and sincere dedication to Hashem that leads them on the right path. Vehikdimu naseh, and they first said the word we will do, lefisha hayu bodchim, because they trusted uma'aminim and believed v'HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Hashem she'ein kamohu sheyeshkiach alehem. that there's no other being in the universe that was looking out and taking care of them like Hashem. V'lo yitzav Elohem, and they totally trusted that Hashem would not command them ela mashi yacholim l'savlo, except things that they could do, things that they would be able to fulfill. V'shet Toraso emes, and that his Torah is a Torah of truth. Beli tosefes, without any additions, ubeli migras, and without any subtractions. Without taking any away thing from the Torah, or adding anything to the Torah, it represents perfect emes. That's what they believed, and that's why they were willing to say, Naseh, we will do it, even before we hear it and listen to it. Ulefichach, and therefore, no'eh lohem lomar naseh v'nishma, and therefore it was a good, proper thing for them to say, Naseh v'nishma, we will do and we will listen. Next paragraph. Omnam, however, keshechotu ba'egel, however, when the Jews committed the sin of the Egel Hazahav, v'kibluhu olav leloah, and they accepted it upon themselves as a deity, nistar perush zeh. This explanation of the words Naseh v'nishma was contradicted. Shaharei, because behold, im hayu ma'aminim b'HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if they actually believed and trusted in Hashem, believe shalem, with a complete heart, she'ein lefi she'ein kamohu, because they trusted in him because they knew nothing else in the world could possibly be compared to Hashem, lo hayu lahem lahamir, then they never would have exchanged es kavodo, his honor, below yoil, to something that couldn't possibly help them or benefit them, meaning the egel. Why was there even the possibility? Why was it even conceivable that any members of the Bnei Yisrael would wish to switch their allegiance from Hashem to the Egel Hazahav, to the golden calf? Umidehemiru, and from the fact that they appeared willing to make that switch, Shmami no, we learn from this, Shelemafreya, retroactively we see Lohoyu libam sholem b'HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Their hearts, even before this incident, must not have been fully trusting in Hashem. Next page, top of the right column. And when they said the words Naseh v'nishma, lo hayamachamas ha'amona bo. It wasn't because they had a full belief in him, lefi shehu yochid ba'olam, because they knew he was the unique creator of the world and the only power in the world. Wasn't for that reason. Shari aminu afilu b'savni shor ochel esev, because they were willing, albeit very temporarily, they were willing to believe in a form of an ox eating grass, a grass-eating ox. That's a reference, a derisive reference, of course, to the Egel. They were willing to believe in that. The kavonosam hayusa keferish harishon, and therefore we are forced to say that their intention when they said Naseh v'nishma was the negative intention, the way we first explained it, going back to the previous discussion where the Zera Shimshon brought in the negative way of understanding Naseh v'nishma, specifically that the Jews were saying, we accept to do the Torah shebichsav, but we're not ready to accept the Torah shebal peh until we hear it and decide which parts we want to accept. V'zehu mamrim heyisim im Hashem. And this is what it means when Moshe said, you were rebels with Hashem from the beginning. Shemiyom asher yotzosim hikir bachem. From the day you left Mitzrayim, Hashem recognized you, that there was this element of rebelliousness and lack of trust. Ela shelo nodu machshavosechem, but your thoughts were not known ad maseh ha'egel, until they became apparent at the sin of the golden calf. Va'az huvrar hadover lamafreya, and then things became clear, going back to the very beginning. So it's of course painful to read this, to read that according to one approach in the Medrash, the lofty, incredibly beautiful words of Naseh v'nishma were actually a negative, or if it can be viewed in a negative way. But what the Zera Shimshon is saying is that according to this approach in the Medrash, which was reflected again in the first paragraph, and the Medrash brought in the first paragraph of this section, is that Hashem was saying, Moshe was saying to the people, Hashem knew from the very first day you left Mitzrayim that you weren't fully faithful and fully trusting in Him. And then that became clear, that lack of faith and trust became clear when the Chet HaEgel was committed after Har Sinai. Next paragraph. Umashechazar lomar besof hatochacha. If we look at the end of Moshe's rebuke in our parsha of Eikev, Mamrim heyisimim Hashem, when Moshe says, you were rebels against Hashem, miyom dati eschem, from the day I first began to know you. That's a expression that Moshe uses, unusual expression. What did he mean? He already said you were rebels against Hashem from the days you left Egypt. So what did he mean? What was he adding when he said you were rebels from the day I first began to know you? Kavanoso hayasolomar. Moshe's intent was to say, Af al pi shechoshav li hakodesh baruch hu la'avon, even though Hashem considered it for me to be a type of sin, Keshe amarti, when I said, Vehem lo ya'aminu li, and they will not believe me. This is going back to even earlier in Sefer Shmos at the Sneh HaBoer Ba'esh, the burning bush episode in which Hashem told Moshe of his mission, charged Moshe with the mission to go back to Mitzrayim and rescue and redeem and take out the Jewish people. And Moshe said, Vehem lo yaminu li. They will not believe me. If I come to them and say, Hashem sent me to you, they won't believe me. Ve'omar li, Hashem said to me at that time, Hey ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. They are believers who are the children and descendants of believers. Atah, but you, Moshe, ein sof chol ha'amin. In the end, you will show a weak spot and not show full emunah and belief and trust in Hashem. V'chulei. The east of a parak Hazorik, as it states in the chapter of Hazorik in Masechet Shabbos, Zelo hoya elo lefisha avarti. This the reason Hashem considered it a sin when I said the Jews won't believe me fully. Lefisha avarti al heve dones kol ha'adam lekafschus. It's because I transgressed a principle from Maseches Avos that says, judge every person favorably. We have to always judge people lekafschus, in a favorable manner. And because I didn't do that, I was punished. How was Moshe punished? When Hashem said to Moshe, I'm going to give you two signs to convince the people. The first one was that Moshe's stick turned into a snake and then returned to being a stick. And the second one was when Hashem said, put your hand inside of your garment. And Moshe did so and then took it out, and it was covered with tzara'as. It was covered with leprosy, which is the classical punishment for Lashon Hara. And that's what Hashem was saying to Moshe. I'm giving you a brief taste of a punishment for Lashon Hara, of leprosy, because you said untrue words about the Jewish people. You said they wouldn't believe you, and you shouldn't have said that. And that's why he was punished very briefly with tsaras on his hand. Afterwards, he put it right back in and took it out, and it was completely healed and back to normal. Next paragraph. Aval ha'emes hi, but the truth is, sha'atem heyisim mamrim es Hashem. Moshe was saying to the people, from the day I first knew you, you were already rebelling against Hashem. Kemoshe asisim b'chorev, as you did publicly at Har Sinai, ubisavera, and at Savera, where the people complained about their journeying, uvemasa, and at Masa, where they complained about water, about the lack of water. Af miyom harishon sheyadati eschem, even from the very first day that I knew you, sha'af al pisha amrali, even though Hashem said to me, hey ma'aminim, they are true believers, goloi hoyu lefanav, it was already revealed in front of Hashem way back then, sha'asidim lachto, that the Jews were destined to sin with the Egel. Moshe Yodea, just like Hashem knew all the way back then, Sha'ani ein sofi lahamin, that I would not show full emunah, which is a reference to the episode when Moshe hit the rock twice, even though Hashem had commanded him to speak to the rock. And Hashem referred to that when he was telling Moshe his punishment. Hashem referred to that as a lack of emunah, a lack of full trust and reliance upon Hashem. So the Zera Shimshon has introduced us to several midrashim and other sources in which we learn, as we've mentioned, painful facts, painful information, namely that Moshe, when he rebuked Klal Yisrael, was saying that there was a streak, a weakness in emunah all the way back in the very beginning when the Jews were still in Mitzrayim, and when they left Mitzrayim, it was hidden, and it came out with the Egel HaZahav when everyone became aware of this extremely serious problem of a lack of full trust and faith and emunah and bitachon and Hashem. And even Moshe says, even I had my moment of showing a lack of proper full respect in emunah and Hashem. So in certain ways, a difficult and challenging piece, but one in which, once again, the Zera Shimshon has started off with questions and with difficult sources, the sources that are difficult to understand, and then brought in more sources and fully explained and elucidated everything for us. Yasher Koch for joining in the Zera Shimshon this week. We look forward, with God's help, to learning again together in the Zera Shimshon next week.